The judge was about to deliver his verdict against the beautiful blonde lawyer everyone had dismissed as incompetent. For 3 hours, he had humiliated her in front of the packed courtroom, making jokes about her appearance and questioning her legal credentials. But what Judge Harrison didn't know was that the stunning woman he was destroying wasn't just any attorney, she was Commander Sarah Mitchell, and the case he thought he was winning was about to become the end of his career. Welcome to Silent Hero Stories. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. The Pacific Coast Courthouse had seen many cases, but none quite like this one. Attorney Sarah Mitchell sat at the defense table, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled despite the stress of the day, her blue eyes focused on the documents before her. At 29, she was strikingly beautiful, the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went, but in this courtroom, her beauty had become a weapon against her. Judge Harrison, a 60-year-old man with a reputation for crushing young lawyers, had been making snide comments about her appearance all morning. "Miss Mitchell," he said with obvious condescension, "perhaps you should focus less on your makeup and more on your case preparation." Sarah's client, Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, had been arrested on false charges of assault by Officer Dixon, a corrupt cop with a history of targeting veterans. The evidence was fabricated, the witness testimony purchased, and the entire case reeked of injustice. But Sarah knew something that everyone else in the courtroom didn't. This trial was about to become much more than anyone anticipated. "Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice calm despite the humiliation, "I object to the prosecution's characterization of my client's military service as a liability." Overruled, Judge Harrison snapped. "Miss Mitchell, you're clearly out of your depth here. Perhaps you should stick to divorce cases and leave criminal law to the professionals." The gallery snickered. The prosecutor, District Attorney Walsh, smirked with satisfaction. Even Sarah's own client looked concerned about her attorney's apparent inexperience. What none of them could see was the small silver pin hidden beneath Sarah's jacket lapel, a pin that bore the insignia of the Navy Judge Advocate General's Corps, and more specifically, a designation that only 12 people in the entire United States military possessed. Officer Dixon took the witness stand with the confidence of a man who had done this many times before. He was a master at painting veterans as unstable, dangerous individuals who couldn't adjust to civilian life. His testimony was smooth, practiced, and completely fabricated. "The defendant became aggressive the moment I approached her vehicle," Dixon lied smoothly. "Her military training made her a threat to public safety. These people, they don't know how to turn it off. She reached for something in her jacket, and I had to act to protect myself and the community." Sarah watched him lie with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the trial. But behind her blue eyes, she was conducting a different kind of assessment, the kind they taught at the Navy War College to officers who specialized in military justice and counterintelligence operations. "Miss Mitchell," Judge Harrison said mockingly, "do you have any questions for this decorated officer, or are you going to sit there looking pretty?" Sarah stood slowly, her movements graceful despite the hostility in the room. "Just a few questions, Your Honor." What happened next would later be studied in law schools as a masterclass in cross-examination, though no one in that courtroom yet understood they were watching a naval intelligence officer dismantle a criminal conspiracy. "Officer Dixon," Sarah began, her voice taking on a different quality, sharper, more precise, "you testified that my client reached for something in her jacket. Can you describe exactly what you saw?" "Like I said, she made a threatening gesture." "A threatening gesture," Sarah repeated. "Officer Dixon, are you familiar with Military Occupational Specialty 35S? Dixon's confident expression faltered slightly. "I don't know what that means." "Military intelligence analyst," Sarah explained, moving closer to the witness stand. "Someone trained to gather and assess information under extreme pressure. Someone who would know exactly how to appear non-threatening to avoid escalation." "Does that sound like someone who would make a threatening gesture during a routine traffic stop?" "Objection," District Attorney Walsh called out. "Relevance?" "I'll allow it," Judge Harrison said, though his tone suggested he was growing impatient with what he saw as amateur theatrics. Sarah smiled, not the nervous smile of an inexperienced lawyer, but something cooler, more calculating. "Officer Dixon, you also testified that you feared for your safety because of my client's military training. Tell me, what specific training were you afraid of?" "Combat training, obviously." "Combat training," Sarah repeated. "Officer Dixon, are you aware that Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's military occupational specialty was 92A, Automated Logistical Specialist?" "I don't understand the question." She was a supply clerk, Officer Dixon. Her job was managing inventory and logistics. The most dangerous thing she handled was a forklift. Sarah's voice carried clearly through the courtroom. So when you say you feared her combat training, what exactly were you afraid of? Her ability to efficiently organize your paperwork? A few people in the gallery chuckled, but Judge Harrison's glare quickly silenced them. Dixon was beginning to sweat, his earlier confidence evaporating under Sarah's precise questioning. Furthermore, Sarah continued, you stated in your report that this incident occurred at 2,300 hours. Military time, Officer Dixon. Very specific. Tell me, why would a civilian police officer use military time in an official report? That's just how we write reports. Is it? Sarah moved to her table and picked up a stack of documents. I have here 17 other arrest reports filed by you in the past 6 months. Not one uses military time. Not one. So why this case, Officer Dixon? Why this particular veteran? District Attorney Walsh was on his feet. Objection. The defense is badgering the witness. Sustained, Judge Harrison ruled, but his tone had changed. He was beginning to pay attention. Sarah nodded respectfully. Officer Dixon, one final question. You testified that you pulled over Staff Sergeant Rodriguez for a broken taillight. Are you aware that her vehicle is equipped with military-grade LED lighting systems that are tested monthly? How could I know that? Because, Sarah said, moving back to her table, the vehicle is registered to Pendleton Marine Base, and all base vehicles undergo mandatory safety inspections. The inspection report, which I'm submitting as Defense Exhibit A, shows that her taillights were tested and certified just 3 days before your alleged traffic stop. The courtroom was becoming very quiet. Judge Harrison was reading the inspection report with growing concern. District Attorney Walsh was frantically shuffling through his papers, looking for something that might salvage his case. But Sarah wasn't finished. Your Honor, she said, I'd like to call a character witness for Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. Proceed, Judge Harrison said, though he looked increasingly uncomfortable. I call Master Chief Petty Officer James Patterson to the stand. The courtroom doors opened, and a man in navy dress blues walked down the aisle. His chest was covered with ribbons and medals, his bearing unmistakably military. But it was the woman who followed him that caused the real stir, a Navy officer whose uniform bore insignia that made several veterans in the gallery stand reflexively. Your Honor, Sarah said as the Master Chief was sworn in, Master Chief Patterson serves as the liaison between military personnel and civilian law enforcement in cases involving veterans' affairs. Judge Harrison was studying the Navy officer who had entered with the Master Chief. Something about her uniform, her bearing, was making him nervous. Master Chief, Sarah continued, in your professional opinion, based on Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's service record and psychological evaluations, is she the type of person who would become aggressive during a traffic stop? Absolutely not, Patterson replied in a voice that carried the authority of 25 years of naval service. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez has one of the cleanest service records I've ever reviewed. No disciplinary actions, no aggressive incidents, multiple commendations for her work with military families. And in your experience, Master Chief, what's the typical pattern when veterans are falsely accused by civilian law enforcement? District Attorney Walsh shot to his feet. Objection. Calls for speculation. Your Honor, Sarah said calmly, Master Chief Patterson has been investigating cases of veteran harassment by corrupt police officers for the past 3 years. I believe his expertise is relevant. Judge Harrison was sweating now. The Navy officer standing at the back of his courtroom was making him extremely nervous, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. I'll allow it, he said reluctantly. In my experience, Master Chief Patterson said, corrupt officers target veterans because they assume no one will believe a person with PTSD or combat stress over a police officer. They count on the system protecting them. And when you investigate these cases, Master Chief, what typically happens to the officers involved? They are prosecuted under the Uniform Code of Military Justice for crimes against federal personnel, Patterson replied. Military personnel remain under federal jurisdiction even when off duty. Judge Harrison's face had gone pale. What exactly are you saying, Master Chief? I'm saying, Your Honor, that any crime committed against an active duty service member is a federal offense, subject to military justice. Active duty? Judge Harrison's voice cracked slightly. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez is active duty? Yes, Your Honor. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez is currently on authorized leave from her assignment at Marine Corps Base Pendleton. The courtroom erupted in whispers. District Attorney Walsh looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Officer Dixon was staring at Sarah with dawning horror. "Your Honor," Sarah said, standing slowly, "I think it's time we clarified a few things about this case." She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a red folder marked with official seals. "I'm submitting Defense Exhibit B, a complete copy of the military's investigation into Officer Dixon's pattern of harassment against military personnel." Judge Harrison's hands were shaking as he broke the seal on the folder. As he read, his face went from pale to ashen. Furthermore, Sarah continued, "I believe the court should know that this case has been under surveillance by Naval Criminal Investigative Service since the moment Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was arrested." The Navy officer at the back of the courtroom stepped forward, and Judge Harrison finally saw the insignia that had been making him nervous. The woman was a captain, equivalent to a full colonel in the Army, and her uniform bore the specialized patches of NCIS. "Your Honor," the captain said in a voice that cut through the courtroom like a blade, "I am Captain Rebecca Foster, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. This case has been designated a federal investigation into crimes against military personnel." Judge Harrison was gripping his gavel so tightly his knuckles were white. "I don't understand. Who are you people?" Sarah smiled, not the nervous smile of a young lawyer, but the confident expression of someone who had just executed a perfect operation. "Your Honor, allow me to introduce myself properly." She reached into her jacket and withdrew her real identification. "I am Commander Sarah Mitchell, United States Navy, Judge Advocate General's Corps. I specialize in military justice and counterintelligence operations. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez isn't just my client, she's under my protection as part of an ongoing investigation into corruption targeting military personnel." The courtroom was dead silent. Officer Dixon looked like he was going to be sick. District Attorney Walsh was frantically trying to figure out how he'd been played so completely. "For the past 6 months," Commander Mitchell continued, "NCIS has been investigating Officer Dixon's pattern of targeting veterans with false charges. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez agreed to serve as bait to gather evidence of his criminal behavior. Your Honor," Captain Foster added, "every conversation Officer Dixon has had since the arrest has been recorded. Every phone call, every meeting with the prosecutor, every witness he bribed, we have it all." Judge Harrison was reading through the military investigation file, his expression growing more horrified with each page. Finally, he looked up at Officer Dixon with pure rage. "Officer Dixon," he said, his voice shaking with anger, "not only did you commit perjury in my courtroom, you harassed a federal officer in the execution of her duties, filed false charges against military personnel, and attempted to corrupt the judicial process." He turned to District Attorney Walsh. "And you, counselor, built a case on fabricated evidence without conducting even basic due diligence." Sarah, Commander Mitchell, stood to address the court one final time. "Your Honor, the United States Navy requests that all charges against Staff Sergeant Rodriguez be dismissed, and that Officer Dixon be remanded to federal custody to face charges under the Uniform Code of Military Justice." "So ordered," Judge Harrison said, slamming his gavel with finality. "All charges dismissed. Officer Dixon, you're under arrest." As federal agents moved in to arrest Dixon, he stared at Commander Mitchell with a mixture of fear and disbelief. You're really Navy?" Sarah's smile was beautiful and absolutely terrifying. "Officer Dixon, you just learned the hard way that some lawyers fight with more than just law books." The beautiful blonde lawyer they had all dismissed had just conducted the most sophisticated military justice operation anyone in that courtroom had ever witnessed. And Officer Dixon's career in corruption had come to an end at the hands of someone he'd never seen coming. What they didn't know about Commander Sarah Mitchell could have filled a classified file. But what everyone learned that day was that sometimes the most dangerous people in the room are the ones everyone chooses to underestimate. The beautiful lawyer they'd mocked had just reminded everyone that justice, like the military, works best when it's precise, overwhelming, and absolutely unstoppable.